Welcome to What Not to Do. I'm Kyle Schmitz, and this is episode 7. I've got Chris.wise with me of the C12 group. He has major success in sales. He has led companies, and now he's advising them. We have a great episode ahead, packed full. Stay right here. We'll be right back. All right, I'm here with Christopher Wise.
Just call me Chris.
Just call you Chris. Chris, what are you drinking?
I'm actually have some sort of green tea. I just read something that green tea is supposed to be really good for you, so all of a sudden I decided to start drinking green tea in the afternoon.
Yeah, anything you Google these days, right?
Yeah, that's got to try something.
That's the truth. I'm sipping on I've been on a Breve latte streak here recently, and for listeners that are following along, we're back at Cop Rock Coffee Company here in Appleton. They do just a fantastic job, so if you're ever in the area, check them out. They've got a location in Green Bay too, which is really, really cool. And today especially, I think the music is a little bit louder, so we've got some background tunes. Yesterday we had, I think it was the Pussycat Dolls, and we got some little bit of funk and groove right now.
Yeah, I heard a little Phil Collins earlier. So
awesome. Well, Chris, you are the owner of the C12 group here in Northeastern Wisconsin.
That is correct.
You advise the C-suite. You advise folks that are running companies, but you yourself have also ran a company. But let's take a few steps back. For our listeners, help us to get to know you a little bit. Who are you? Where are you from? Family life, general interests, and then let's go from there. So, who are you?
Yeah. I ask myself that question every day. Who am I? So I grew up in a small town in almost central Wisconsin, just south of Fond du Lac, small town called Mayville. So about 4,000 people. Married my high school sweetheart. So we went to different universities. I went to UW Green Bay. She was down in Marion and Fond du Lac. Stayed dating all the way through college.
Okay.
Dated 7 years, and we've been married 21.
Yeah.
So we've been together more than we've been apart. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah. So 4 kids. Our oldest is in college.
Nice.
And I have a sophomore in high school. Our only son, is an 8th grader this year.
Yeah.
And our little cuddle bug is our 5th grader.
Yeah. That's so awesome. And they are into various sports and activities and interests.
Yeah, my first 2 are really big into literature, actually. Really like to write. They're both involved in a student newspaper. Or my first daughter she was editor-in-chief. The other one following in her footsteps is assistant editor right now. But really into that. My son is the athlete, so we're spending a lot of times on weekends going to tournaments and things like that.
Yeah.
And we'll see how our youngest goes.
Well, that's awesome. And how long have you been in the Appleton area now?
Great question. So we've been back about 10 years, 11 years already. Was all across the Midwest. I can kind of talk about that a little bit as my career progressed, but we did a lot of moving around. But I think it was 2 years ago, I could finally make the statement that the house I'm in now was the longest I've been in a house for my entire life, even growing up. So this has become truly, truly home for us.
That's awesome. Yeah. So let's get into just a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do. Kind of lead us back. I mean, like we've already a brief intro to what you do, but even start back from there. What did you study in college? Were you always business minded? Did you always have this vision that you eventually wanted to run a company someday and help folks, or kind of take us on that journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did a lot of work with my dad growing up. So he was in construction. So he worked with he was a superintendent for a construction company, but he always did a lot of side work. So I had the opportunity in the summers. My mom and dad are divorced when I was young, so I never remember them living together. So he's in Cleveland, Ohio area. So I'd go to kind of like the big city, and I was able to work with him somewhat actually during the day, but then doing side work at night. So I got pretty handy doing some construction stuff. So I really loved the ability to see something that wasn't to become something that is, right? So I actually see the building process, which is very different from what I do right now. But when you see people transform, when you see people change, when you see where they were and where they are now, you can actually see that, quote unquote, construction happening. Yeah. So I was able to do a lot of stuff with him and get that kind of handy, forte, so to speak. So becoming very, very beneficial as I became a homeowner and things like that. But through college, I had the opportunity of working with one of my uncles who owned a cheese factory. Okay. So I did a lot of flea markets with him. So one of my favorite...
Which cheese factory is that?
Is Wyowega Star Dairy.
Oh, cool, yeah.
And then he is the family company, but he owns Steve Wholesale down in Sun Prairie area. Cool. So we had an opportunity to do all sorts of flea markets. So I would be, I'm guessing I'm 10 years old, and working down on the square in Madison, selling cheese and sausage, and having people come up to me and saying, "Wow, you're pretty good. You want to come sell for me?" And at 10 years old, I knew they were joking. They knew they were joking, but I was like, "Hey, buy a couple more sticks of sausage, some more cheese curds." They would laugh, and then they would buy it. So that kind of got me going on a marketing or kind of sales career. With him, we also had the opportunity to do. One summer, we bought a truck and I did ice cream. And I went to all this county fairs all around the state of Wisconsin. So I got to do that, and that was on my own by myself all summer long, going from county fair to county fair. But that was a lot of fun, meeting a lot of interesting people.
Who doesn't love ice cream?
Yeah, that's
county fair food. Come on, right?
Exactly. It was a lot of fun. So did that, and then through college, I had the opportunity of working with the student newspaper there. So I was an advertising manager up at UW Green Bay for the student newspaper called the Fourth Estate. And it was during that time I also found out that I found what it meant to make a trade in the industry. So let's just say that the newspaper staff had a lot of really neat opportunities at local establishments. Okay. Lots of pizza parties. We'll just leave it at that.
Right. Quote unquote pizza parties.
Pizza parties, yes. So after school, I worked for a little while as in a marketing department for a industrial paintings, coatings, and linings. So everything from secondary containment, you're working on big oil fields or rigs or containers, and basically the paint or coating that goes on the concrete, to coatings and linings that go inside of railroad cars that haul everything from sulfuric acid to Jim Beam. So did a lot of the marketing for that, and then had the opportunity to really change careers and got into pharmaceuticals. So I left Green Bay, Wisconsin, went down to southern Illinois, right on the Kentucky border, with Pfizer Pharmaceuticals. So I was a sales rep down there, for a little while. Cut my teeth in the pharma industry. So I did that for a couple years. Then went to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. Was there for about 5 years. All along the way, getting married and having kids. Moved to Chicago. Was in charge of initial training and development for new hires for Pfizer. Did some management development myself there. Got exposed to some top-notch training in individuals. Came out and actually managed 5 states. So I had 12 reps working for me, basically covering the upper Midwest. Went through a little bit of a change, a different division. So I just had state of Minnesota, picked up some more customers, had about 10 reps under me at that point in time. Then had basically a forced opportunity of, hey, why don't you go out to Colorado or Michigan? And being the fact that we had 3 kids at the time and want to get a little closer to family, took an opportunity to get back into sales consultancy here in Wisconsin. Cool. So did that for about another 5.5 years, and then saw an opportunity to change industries again and work for a little bit of a smaller company, but became the president of All About Packaging, which is it's a specialized packaging company, really a thermoformer based on thermoforming blister packages and clamshells, things like that. So it's pretty neat.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So did that for 4.5 years. Built the business up, and then there just was this appropriate time to say, all right, let's do something again. So you can see there's a history of me doing things for a while, and it's like, okay, successful there, let's go try something else. And that's where led me to where I am today with the C12 group. So with the C12 group,
what do you do?
So I work with Christian business owners and CEOs, and so I really bring them together in a like a peer advisory format. So we meet once a month for a full day. We go over business curriculum. We go over an opportunity on how they can kind of expand the gospel in the marketplace, do it in appropriate ways, but how they can live their faith in the marketplace by running really, really good businesses. So there's this fallacy out there that if you're a Christian business owner, you have to be really soft, and that you can't hold people accountable, and you shouldn't expect results.
Or you can't be trusted.
Or you can't be trusted, right? Because, let's be honest, you got a little fish on your business card.
Hey, brother, I want a discount.
Yeah, right, exactly, and give it to me for free.
Right.
We don't play that way. We want to. The whole idea here is if you're running your business and you're running it for the glory of God, you're going to be the best business in that industry. You're going to treat your employees the best. You're going to have the best products. You're going to deal with integrity. You're going to do what you say you're going to do, and people are going to want to work with you.
Yeah, it's really making sure that your personal values as the leader of this company are actually being fleshed out by the company itself. That they're not at odds, right? And so, and maybe someone who's listening to this isn't a Christian, but they probably get that concept as far as what are my values and how can I run this company at odds with who I am and what I actually believe in. And so you're helping other Christian leaders of their companies to marry that concept of how their values come through their work and their fingertips, and helping them to see that those two things aren't at odds, right? Their Christian faith and how that shapes how they do business.
Yeah, and exactly. And we would never say, hey, only hire Christians into your business.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And that's probably not a good business model. And therefore, we're not going to promote that. The fact is, as a Christian running a business, you have an obligation to steward what's been given to you well. And that includes all of the people in that organization, whether or not they're believers. You still need to treat them with love and respect and kindness and give them every opportunity to be successful.
Yeah, again, consistent with what you say you believe in, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And which is kind of funny why that, that old saying of like don't trust the guy with the fish on his car or whatever it is because he's going to cut corners or not do the job or not come back or show up or not follow through, whatever it might be. That's very inconsistent with what someone claims they believe, right? Which has kind of created that stigma even in the Christian community, right? And that's something that you guys are working hard to correct. And again, just that consistency between faith and work and those values at work.
Exactly. And just making sure that people understand what's truly at the core. And that is, that we want to love each other, right? And that we want to do the best with what we've been given. Everybody has unique talents and abilities. Everybody's been given a certain set of gifts to utilize, and how can you bring the best of those out, in every scenario? Not everybody is the same. Thank goodness.
Yeah, that's so cool. That's awesome. So then talk to me a little bit about why you do what you do. I mean, a lot of different options. You could still be running a company yourself, but now you're advising folks that are in companies. What's that driving, motivational force or pulse within you that says, this is why, I wake up and I'm excited to do this. Why am I doing this? Why did you choose to be doing this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I saw a lot of success as far as sales when I was in charge of myself, making sure that I would deliver on results. But where I saw true satisfaction is when I started managing or leading people. There's managing people and there's leading people, right? and you need to, as a leader of an organization, you need to be able to do both well and know when to lead and when to manage. And where I really saw my spirit light up is when I was able to help other people be successful. So I first noticed that when I was in initial training. So you take somebody who didn't know anything about medicines, or disease states. And then also through an opportunity of them learning, putting in the hard work of learning and studying, but then able to walk them through it, and that aha moment comes out. You're like, oh, now I get it. Yeah. That was impressive for me. That's what I wanted to continue to do. Yeah. So then that happened, continuing going out and seeing people be successful in the field as far as salespeople, and then running an organization, being able to do that from everything from the maintenance department to the engineering team to the people working, customer support, and even working with the largest customers. So it had an opportunity to really see that and see that develop throughout the entire organization. So going from a really large global company to a smaller manufacturing company, here in Wisconsin, to now an opportunity to take those skills that I have and be able to impart that into other people, to have them be successful, is something that's really, really exciting to me.
Well, you're getting at the heart of this podcast.
Hey, this is Kyle. Well done on your decision today to be great. Those are my kiddos in the background. Hey, if you want more of this kind of content, find me on social media. We'll keep the conversation going. You can hit me up on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, at StartWithWNTD. Again, at StartWithWNTD. We'll see you there.
Yes, a lot of what you're talking about, even behind your why, is moving from a place of success to significance.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So you were successful, you had that, but there's not a lot of significance there or impact aside from how it impacts you and your immediate family. But you want to take that success and teach or reproduce it in others, which leads to a level of significance. Your impact is much greater because not only have you had success yourself, but now you're reproducing that by leading others so they themselves can experience success in their own lives. And again, it's why I mentioned why it's kind of at the heart of this podcast. And a lot of stuff that's out there, folks helping to teach folks what to do, which is great. And we're flipping the script here and saying, on our journey to success and helping to equip others that, are earlier in their journeys than we are, what not to do. What are some pitfalls, mistakes that we should avoid. But before we get into that specifically, as you look back through your career, your journey, you've had success. So tell us a little bit about what you think you did right. Think of it as kind of like maybe a humble brag or that type of thing, but just you had success for a reason, right? And so what were some of the steps you took or decisions that you made that really played into your success?
So I would say one of the things that played into my success in a number of different things is I listen to other people.
Yeah.
One of the things that I try to do in every situation is interact with people, is to network, is to find people who are successful and talk to them. And that doesn't have to be people that are older than you. When I was in sales for pharmaceuticals, we got together every year and celebrated who won. And I knew who was winning because I was in contact with them on the phone or email or whatever, say, what are you doing to win?
Yeah.
And I just remember we had, so we have regional and then national sales awards.
Yeah.
And the one year that I took second in the region was only to the guy who took first in the nation. And we were working together on that. So he was down in St. Louis and I was in Minnesota. But it was a fantastic opportunity to really do that old adage of iron sharpens iron. What are you doing today? Yeah. And then you really push each other. It was competitive, but it was also a way to make each other better. And we had each other's best interest in mind. And that's the other thing I think is don't, we'll get to this don't thing, but don't burn bridges.
Yeah.
People really don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. And people won't remember what you did, they'll remember how you made them feel.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important to really create those strong relationships with people.
Yeah.
And then they'll be able to help you out. Because in general, people want to be good. People want to help you out.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's awesome. So you listen to other people. You, in a sense, you competed against them, but in a constructive way, not a destructive way, where you were competing, yes, and it motivated you both, but you also were learning from each other, and intentionally so.
Yeah. And I'm not going to lie to you. There are people out there that were only out to beat me.
And they felt that knife in your back, right?
Exactly. So I don't want to give everybody the impression that everybody's altruistic, right? That's not the case. But you'll know who those people are because of how they interact with you. And look for the people who are willing to share their success.
Yeah.
Look for the people who are willing to build you up because they already get it. They know that if they help you, it'll come back to help them.
Yeah, one of my favorite old fables is, a genie appeared to greed and envy, one day and granted them, each a wish. And that the second person to wish would get twice as much as the first. And so naturally greed says, well, you go first, envy, And so envy goes, thoughts about it, thinks about it for a second, cracks a smile and says, I wish for one blind eye. So greed ends up with two, right? And it's amazing.
How you can take something that could be so good, and because of your attitude, you make it bad for you, but worse for other people.
Well, and how destructive those forces at play. Just even in the workforce, even a mixed team, greed in a sense says, I want what they have, and envy says, if I can't have it, I'm not going to let them have it. And so just a fun little parable there, if you will, but man, how true it is. Just getting into how you work with other people and to beware, like you said, and not to over-romanticize it. Not everyone in the workplace is out for your best interest in mind, and you need to be careful with that. And there are so many emotions at play with their livelihood is on the line. They've got families, all that kind of stuff, and unfortunately, not everyone shares the same ethics how they go about doing business. So you're looking back. What's some other things that you did right in your career?
Try new things. I think that's really the big thing. If you stay within your comfort zone, you're going to stay who you are. And I don't think anybody, when they're 19, 20, 21, want to stay who they are at that point in time. They could be really, really good, but think of how much better they could be, in 5, 10, 15 years. They continue to grow and develop.
Yeah, so much formation yet to be had, in their lives, that young. Awesome. So let's pivot here.
Yeah.
And obviously, the podcast is called "What Not to Do" for a reason, right? And so, we don't always love leaning into our failures, but I think when we see them as a means to really help other people, it actually is something that we don't mind leading into after all. If we could, just like the way we might feel about our own kids or our own students or our own players, or whatever our various perspective is, the team that we're leading, right? Leading people, we're trying to lead them to success, just like we have. We have their best in mind, and we don't want them to repeat the same mistakes that we made,
right? And
we don't want to withhold that information from them. So, kind of with that in mind, as you're looking back over your story, your career, your journey, what's one or two failures that come to mind that you would readily tell someone, don't do this?
We'll go way back. I mentioned it very early on, but so my mom and dad were divorced, right? Okay. So one of the things that was very important for me of what not to do is to pick a wrong spouse. So I would say that's one of the key things that you do is don't run into it, don't do anything quickly, don't get married because your buddies are getting married or whatever. Pick a spouse that's going to be a good fit for you.
Why is that important?
I think it's even Warren Buffett that says that the most important thing that you can do in life that'll determine your success is your spouse, right? And that came up today because I knew we were going to be talking today. So I tested my wife on this, right? Wife for 21 years and dated for 7 before that, right? So I said, hey, what's my biggest failure? And there was this pause because she was processing it. And she looked at me, she goes, I cannot win that question. Yeah, I am not going to answer that question because there is no way for me to come out on top. And so I smiled. And there's wisdom right there, because there's so many spouses, husbands or wives or partners that would say, oh, your biggest failure is this. Okay? And then depending if I thought that was a failure or not, that could lead to a whole different conversation, right? A whole level of insecurity and what. So what she said, which I want to share with people, on the podcast too, is there's failures and then there's learnings.
Yeah.
Right. So many things may not have gone the way I wanted them to go, but at least in my life, I really don't consider them failures. I consider it an opportunity to experience what not to do next time.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of those things in life. How to not prepare for an interview, how to not prepare for a big sales presentation. How to not prepare for your wife's birthday. Those are all things that you can learn how not to do. And the wife's birthday is a failure, I'll admit that. But the rest of them are just opportunities to learn and to change your behavior for next time.
Yeah, for sure. Well, the good news is that Valentine's Day is Friday, so you have a chance to redeem yourself.
Yeah, that's it.
So you had mentioned earlier in discussing things that you did right, but you had mentioned don't burn bridges.
Yeah.
Can you unpack that a little bit more for me?
Yeah. So there's a couple ways to really unpack burning bridges. One is, as you go through your life, you're going to have different careers, which means you might change companies, which means you're going to have different coworkers. And you will have an opportunity to fully and in all candor let loose on somebody who you think that you won't see anymore on a day-to-day basis. I'm going to challenge you not to do that. Number one, you should be giving constructive feedback to people all the way through, so you should never get to that point. But the other thing is to really unload on somebody is never good for you, and it's never good for them. You need to put the best interest of other people ahead of yourself. If there's a couple things that they need to know that are hidden gaps, find a way to do it graciously. If you feel like you've been mistreated from an organization or a company or a leader, take the higher ground and leave on good terms. Because there's just way too many bad stories of people leaving on bad terms and then it coming back, to haunt them later in their career.
Do you have any stories from your own experience that you had that issue, burned a bridge, transitioning a job, or something else that you've experienced in counseling others? Or
not me personally, because I think I learned that early on. Just the way I've been.
You did right.
Yeah, one of being mentored that way. But there's definitely people who have done things in organizations on their way out, taken things they shouldn't have taken. We're just not gracious on the way out. And that really negated all the good they did for that organization for the 3 to 5 years they were there. And nobody felt good when they mentioned that person's name because of an action they took in 30 minutes.
One of the sayings that often rolls off my tongue is "big city, small world." And regardless of where you're at, if it's Chicago or LA or Green Bay, Wisconsin, whatever it might be, it's a big city, but it's a small world. And generally those kind of interactions will follow you. Not always, but often, and for the sake of your own future and opportunities, that type of stuff. And just for the sake of being peaceable, but it can be tempting, especially if you've been really wronged, the temptation to pick up a hammer and, look at everything as a nail is there, it's real. And what you're saying is don't do that. You're going to burn bridges and it's not going to end as well as you think it would be. It's not going to be that satisfying, at the end of the day.
I'll lean into that a little bit more, and this isn't really around burning bridges, but it's about being an authentic you.
Yeah.
And that would be a failure / learning that I learned very, very quickly. So going through my managerial career, I had a number of mentors that I looked up to that approached business with their style and their authentic self. They were successful, so I just assumed that if I took that mantra, if I took that demeanor, that I would be successful too. And it became very apparent very early that you need to be who you are. You need to be authentic to who you are, because people are going to see through it otherwise. And he was very much a more in-your-face type of individual, which worked for me. But I tried to do that early in my career, and it just wasn't who I was. So people saw through it, and they pushed back, and that caused a lot of relational discourse. You know, there were some hurt feelings because it really wasn't coming from my heart and my soul. It was coming from what I thought I should be saying, instead of having a deeper conversation that I'm more confident in having right now, and really getting to the heart of the issue.
And maybe it would be more true to who you are as you learned and matured throughout your career, but at that point, adopting that particular trait or characteristic was premature, and like you said, people just saw it as fake. That's really interesting. So how would you say that? Because obviously we learn by imitation,
right?
And I think personality isn't static. I think it's something that is constantly developing, and especially is shaped by those who are we around. You know,
around experiences, failures and successes.
Exactly. But to your point, trying to adopt it prematurely, or in a sense, kind of acting or trying to be like someone else in a way that's not authentic and doesn't really have any kind of congruency with who we are, is a recipe for failure, not success. And so how would you say that? Don't try to imitate someone else, or what would you say?
And I've been thinking through this, because we always look at those people who have been successful, right? We read their biographies, we talk to them, I just told you earlier on that, talk to other people that are having success. Find out what they're doing, find out what they've done, find out their keys, and then internalize that, but process it through who you are and through the gifts that you have. Now, I talked about this mentor. He had an innate ability to develop a deep relationship very quick, so he could just scream at you, right? But you would run through a wall. Yeah, you loved it, right? You'd run through a wall. It's like coaches.
Yeah.
If you're talking about athletics, there's some coaches who, scream and holler, and some coaches that are quiet and never raise their voice. Tony Dungy comes to mind there, right? Very different styles, but both can be very successful. You just need to be authentically you.
Yeah.
Don't change the results. Don't change what you want to achieve, but change the way that you do it.
So I think maybe really shorthandedly, you could simply say, don't be somebody else. That doesn't mean not to learn from somebody else. That doesn't mean to take their qualities and traits and, like you said, internalize them.
Yeah.
But if we're just trying to put on the suit or put on the mask, it's going to be very disingenuous.
Yeah.
And it's not going to help us towards success at all, or let alone help anybody else.
Yeah, I think that mask is a really good analogy. Don't put on somebody else's mask. Be who you are.
Yeah, well, definitely be yourself, because otherwise the police and Sting they'll be watching you. Not sure if our listeners can hear, but we got some good tunes cranking out right now, which is great. Okay, so we dug into some things you did right. We dug into some things you did wrong. You cautioned others not to do. But so tell me this. So let's say you're sitting at a table. With a young guy who was saying, "Hey, Chris, I love what you're doing right now. You've led companies, but you've had success in sales, and now you're advising folks that lead companies. I could see myself doing that down the road. How do I get to where you are?" How would you counsel them? What advice would you give to help them avoid the same mistakes that you've made? Assuming you've got their best in mind, and you don't want them to have to reinvent the wheel, or at the least, you want them to be able to avoid the mistakes that you made, some of the failures. How would you counsel them? How would you talk to them? What would you do differently?
A couple things. treat every season as a season and take advantage of every opportunity. So treat every season as a season. So depending on where you are in life mix, enjoy those first years of marriage, of parenthood, of being in a career. Enjoy them because they don't last. And so here's not even a learning. Here's a failure for you. We pulled out some old videos of when my second daughter was learning to walk. And my wife, we had the little camcorder, so my wife was out there, and she was, taking. It wasn't on an iPhone back then.
What's an iPhone?
Yeah, exactly. So she was doing this, and it was the first couple steps that she was taking, and then the video camera pans to the kitchen, and I'm on my cell phone doing business.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize it in that season that I was missing a season. I was missing that season of first steps because I was too distracted by things that weren't important. They were urgent, but they weren't important. You got to keep the important things important in every season, and that will change. And each season is different. Its length and its duration, and its depth of importance too. But that was just one of those things where it's like, ooh, yeah, that one hit me pretty hard.
Yeah, and there's a season to keep the laptop open and keep crunching, right?
Oh yeah.
What you're saying is be aware of the season, be aware of the moment that you're in, that type of stuff, and just be attentive and aware, I guess, and then enjoy that season. So enjoy it when you're burning the midnight oil, and enjoy it closing the laptop when you need to.
And I think that's the key, burning the midnight oil, which means don't burn the 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock p.m. oil.
Right. If that's your family time.
Right.
Yeah,
and make sure that you're setting boundaries around that, so that you can enjoy that time, so you don't regret not being there for a soccer game or a music recital or something else. Make sure that you're not missing out on that season, because as a parent of 4, each season is great, the next season is better, but when you're in this season, you can't go back and be in the past season.
Yeah, and we joked a few minutes ago about Sting watching you, right?
Yeah.
But the reality is, in our digital age, everybody's watching, right? And the ripple effect of that type of thing, and the negative unintended consequences that it can have from not being present, not enjoying that particular season, getting priorities mixed up, when needed, can really do you can have some collateral damage that was never intended.
Yeah, I will say one of the major benefits I had when working at the packaging company was the owners were very, very adamant about making sure that you turn stuff off.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to do that at times too, because if you keep working, eventually you won't be the best at what you do, right? So you got to take some time to get away, and that's important. And that's important as a leader, that you allow the people underneath you to know that as well. Don't be sending emails at 3 a.m. on Saturday. It just there will be a time and a place to do that. Doesn't mean you don't have to work hard, especially early in your career, to gain that knowledge and wisdom. And there's a time for that. But make sure that if you're doing that, my advice to you is have that self-imposed. Don't put that on other people.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's so good. It's not only that, but it goes back to what you're talking about with marrying the right spouse. That someone who has that vision, that knows that there's going to be those times that can be supportive. Maybe there's a time when you need to take the 3 a.m. call. Maybe there's a time that you don't need to take the 3 a.m. call. And it's good to have a spouse who supports the times when you do, and who supports the times when you don't, or holds you accountable to when you don't.
Yeah, and to keep those lines of communication open.
Exactly, right.
So that you do know you're spending too much time doing that, or you know what, you haven't worked past 5 o'clock for the last 8 weeks. Maybe you should be putting in a little bit more time, right?
Yeah. Where are those commissions?
Yeah, exactly.
Now you said treat every season as a season, and you mentioned one more thing. As far as what you tell them to do differently.
treat every season as a season, and
I missed it.
oh man, it's good.
Back to a little more of that funk and groove.
Yeah.
It's all good. Our listeners heard it. We can't rewind live.
might have to edit out that silence.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else you would add to that? Anything counseling a guy that's taking your path, even a gal, that's taking your path? What would you tell them to do different than you did? Anything else come to mind?
Yeah, I think that be who you are. Make sure that you're focused on the important things. Create a wake of, and I can't think of a better word, but a wake of goodness. And my biggest visual for this is we happen to have a boat, and calm waters on a lake, and you take that speedboat and you're going great. The issue is if you look behind the boat, is you're leaving a wake, and that wake impacts the entire lake.
Oh yeah.
Now, some of it more than others, but there's a little wave that's going to be on the rest of that lake, or that pond or river or whatever you're on. So I just challenge people to really think about what kind of wake are you leaving as a leader. Are people around you better when you leave an organization or a situation or a job position, or are they going through detox?
Yeah, it's interesting. It goes back to that idea of the unintended consequences of that ripple effect, right? And I really like that analogy on being on a boat in the water, because it does that wake effect, right? You get some people that are flipping you the bird,
Yeah.
What are you doing, And you even have, depending on various lakes, you've got various rules and regulations about, where you can have a wake and where, if there's a no wake, no wake rule. And so, yeah, that's really good. That's really good. Be aware of the wake that you're leaving behind, the ripple effect, the unintended consequences.
Yeah, and that's the key, because I think at least my goal in life is to leave the situation, the area, the company, the people better than when I found them.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So if I can impart some wisdom in people, that's why I love that you invited me to do this. I'm impart a little bit of wisdom to make somebody better, tomorrow than they are today.
Yeah.
That's my goal in life.
Well, you've given us more than just a little,
Okay.
which is awesome.
Hey, so you're still listening, which means you like it? I think so. If you do, share this with somebody else who you think would not only like it, but be helped by it, and join us in our mission to make the world be great.
So we all are formed. We all are impacted by others. It's inescapable, whether it's an environment that we grew up in, directly by parents or coaches or teachers, bosses, peers, but even indirectly through books, through people we might never meet. We just hear their lectures or their talks, or we read their stuff, we consume it, and it forms us and shapes us. So I'm curious, and I'm sure my listeners are curious too, who in your life, Chris, has been, I guess when you think of your journey, your success, your formation, who comes to mind as the most impactful?
Yeah, there's a bunch of authors that are out there, and I've had the opportunity to go to a bunch of conferences, both simulcast and live, and heard a lot of authors. And I'll share some of those, but I think for me it was my first manager when I got into pharmaceuticals. That was really my first, quote unquote, big time gig. That real job. But more than just being a real job, that individual, Tom Hensley, was a guy that really got me focused in on what's truly important. And I'm sure he had his kind of core things that he tried to impart. But I tell you the three things that I took away from him and everything they did. First one is to love people, and that's different from what some of the listeners might think. Loving people just isn't always giving them a hug and slapping them on the shoulder. Loving people is having the relationship with them, to give them the difficult news, to tell them that they're not going in the right direction, to have that relationship so that you can go deep into topics and situations where they're not doing well, or to really celebrate when they're having success. So truly love people in the true sense of the word. The second thing really is expect more of people than they expect out of themselves. And really to push them, because people are pretty good at doing what they think they can do. But so many people, and I would imagine a bunch of these listeners, have accomplished so much more than they've ever thought they could because somebody pushed them. So really expect more out of people than they expect out of themselves.
Yeah, it helps them to live up to something and kind of gives them something to aspire to. I would think builds them up.
Yes.
Giving them a bigger vision of themselves than maybe what they have.
And it has to be true, too.
Right,
I mean, you can't expect somebody to do, $1 million. $1 million in sales.
You're 5'5", but you can be 6'10".
Yeah, right. You can grow.
I'm a real boy.
Yeah. But within expectations, and always push that level, because we perform best when we're just out of our comfort zone.
Yeah.
Right? If we're in our comfort zone, then we can tend to get lazy, but continue to push and grow and develop. And I think the last thing with that is the people that you work for or with or around, however you want to say it, is to give them every resource they need to be successful.
Yeah,
fully equip them. And whether that means taking less for yourself as far as time, and really putting time into them, make sure that you're giving them everything that they need to be, like you said, fully equipped, to resource them well.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, you've given not only what not to do, but you've also given a lot of really good advice throughout our time together in this conversation. But I'm curious, what's some of the worst advice you've ever been given, or B, that you're floating around, like, like we're sitting here now, and like, let's say someone over at table 11 is like, oh, hey buddy, you should do this, and you hear it and you're like, you just cringe, you're like, no, you're gonna go interrupt two perfectly good strangers to keep them from self-destruction.
Yeah.
What is some of the worst advice you've been given or you hear?
Or hear. The two kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Is one, start using credit cards so you can build up your credit score. So that's kind of one of them. Go in debt to build your credit score. And the other one is kind of around that. And somebody actually gave me this advice: is buy more house than you can afford. And the whole intent there was, when you have a high mortgage, that's going to incentivize you to go sell more, make more commissions, and go do it. But it also creates a potential real issue if that job is no longer there and you're changing careers or have opportunities. So
sounds like that might be slipping a noose around your neck.
Yeah. So I think the worst advice I ever heard was buy more house than you can afford.
You heard it here, folks. Oh, that's awesome. Well, good. Okay, so last but not least, one of my favorite questions to ask. It's rush hour in every major city throughout the world. You got billions of people that are listening to, probably what not to do on their drive home, right? Their podcast commute or whatever. And they look up and they see this billboard. Billions of people are going to see this, and it's your billboard, and it has your message on it. What message do they see?
Yeah, it's a simple message, but it's hard for people to understand, and that's you are loved, but more so that you're loved by the Creator of the universe, and Jesus as a sacrifice so that you can have a personal relationship with him. So that's the message that everybody needs to hear. People are going to receive that differently at different parts of times in their life, and I firmly believe that nobody ever came to Christ via a baseball bat. But people just need to know and understand that they are loved, and to me, that's the most important thing.
Well, awesome. Chris, this has been so good. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've been helped by this conversation, and I'm assuming our listeners have been too, so thank you so much.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was Chris Wise, and just such a helpful conversation, so much insight. So let's recap. The first thing Chris said not to do was don't burn bridges. Don't burn bridges. He mentioned that we might be tempted in certain situations, personally, professionally, to want to exact vengeance, take things into our own hands and make sure that we get the justice that we deserve. And sometimes that can actually yield more destructive results than constructive results. And so be more mature, walk away, do it peaceably, and it'll yield a blessing for you in the future. Second, don't pick the wrong spouse. Don't pick the wrong spouse. This is huge. In a sense, a marriage is, in many ways, so much of a partnership on how you have to do life and work together. And if you're not on the same page, especially on the big picture things, the non-negotiable things, it's going to be a disaster. One thing that my wife and I have talked about before we got married was, and I guess the way that I think about it is, you really want to be united on what I call the foundation and the framework things, right? So if you think about marriage like building a house, you're going to lay a foundation, which is so important. You need a strong foundation and the framework. These are the things that keep the house up, right? And you're going to, put up walls and paint them and put up pretty decorations or whatever it is. And those things are good and important. But the structure of the house is so important, because if it's weak, if it's crumbling, if it's broken, it's not going to stand. And marriage is very similar to that. You need to build strong. Foundations matter. So build strong. And one of the most foundational things you can do when it comes to marriage is picking the right spouse, right? Don't pick the wrong spouse. Third, from Chris, don't be somebody else. Don't be somebody else. It's really good. We learn by imitation. So in one sense, it's inescapable. We're going to take upon ourselves the qualities of those that we look up to. And that's natural. But what's not natural is when we try to, superimpose those upon ourselves immediately. Right? When we don't grow up into those things, we just try to, we put on our dad's shoes, right? And he's got a size 14 and we got a size 5 and we can hardly walk. It's goofy and it's not natural. And a similar thing, we can repeat those same kind of childish mistakes when we're older, trying to be someone that we're not. And so we want to make sure that we give maturity the time to grow up into those things. And that's a really, really good thing. In the meantime, really be yourself. And as you adapt and adopt those various qualities and characteristics that you admire, then you make them your own. And that's a good thing. That's a really good thing. Well, thank you again for listening. And I love to remind you, this isn't about me. This is about you, right? This is about other folks that are jealous for your success and they're willing to lean into their failures so you don't have to make the same mistakes. And that's amazing. So if you've been helped by this podcast and maybe this episode in particular or a previous one, please share it with a friend, share it with someone else that would also be helped, and help us in our mission to really help the world, all 7 billion people, really, truly be great. And the way that we can do that is to stop reinventing the wheel. Right? Let's share the wisdom that's gained even through our failures and those lessons learned. Let's pass them down so people don't have to keep on repeating the same mistakes. Well, I would love to know who you want on the podcast. So if you have someone in mind, shoot me a note, tag them, have them reach out to me. I would love to sit down and have a cup of coffee, a beer, a cigar, and lean into their story, get to know their failures, share it with the world. And again, connect with me on social media. You know the platforms. You can find me at Start With WNTD. Again, at Start With WNTD on Instagram, Twitter, the Facebook, LinkedIn, Kyle M. Schmitz. You can look me up there. It'd be great. Websites, startwithwntd.com. startwithwntd.com. A lot of different ways you can access it, and it's great. So let's get out there, keep the conversation going, and share the content. Last but not least, if you are finding benefit in this too, another way that you can support is through Patreon. So we've got an account set up there under What Not to Do. It's patreon.com/whatnottodO. And if you think this kind of work is needed and we need more of it, and you're saying, hey, I'm willing to put my money where my mouth is, that'd be a huge blessing to us, huge blessing to me, really be able to spur us on and equip us to be able to do the work to keep putting this content out. And so thank you again for all the support, all the shares, everything. It's huge. It means so much to us. Well, it's been said that good men learn from their own mistakes, but great men, they learn from the mistakes of others. So go, be great, and we'll see you next time.